What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Alphaville, and we're returning to Prostitute for the penultimate track. Once again, big shout out to Yun and to all those who've been following the Alphaville journey, which is about to reach the next chapter. But yes, the second to last tune on the album is Euphoria, which relates to an elated and enjoyable state, indeed, beyond enjoyable, ecstatic, ultimately good in a way that is transcendent or otherwise all-encompassing. So that sounds like a great starting point for a song. Of course, there could be irony to it, there could be a darker underbelly, it could be more mixed and nuanced than it sounds, but most people strive for euphoric states, whether that's in terms of brain chemistry, the release of dopamine, whether it's related to qualitative assessment from your active mind, or whether it is actually on a physical level. It could be all three of those things. It could be metaphysical, the idea of like spiritual transcendence and feeling euphoric in terms of your place in the universe or indeed some belief system. So there's a lot of potential in the title, and as I said, it sounds very positive, but we'll see what I can catch in practice. This is Alphaville, the track is Euphoria, and it's on their 1994 album Prostitute. so much to say. I'm going to try to keep this all in the front of my brain here. So, first of all, there was a long instrumental opening to the track, and it really had this incredible sonic quality where it sounded like if you mixed cosmic ambient with some blues flavor and artful synth pop stylings, you'd get something like this. And indeed, it did feel very euphoric in a transcendent and galactic type of way, but with a human touch. Again, that bluesy guitar sort of grounded it in the world of humanity, whereas a lot of the other sonics, the organ, the keyboards, and these not arrhythmic or atonal noises, but there were some noises that sounded like the soundtrack to a space movie more than like musical ingredients per se, and it really had me transported sonically. Then in comes, I guess that was Marion. It didn't sound as immediately and obviously Marion vocals as many of his vocals I've heard, but assuming that was him, he comes in with like this musical theater type of delivery. It sounded like the kind of singing you would hear in, Phantom of the Opera or some type of musical, and it was very like he was addressing us, the audience. It didn't feel like he was in his head singing about his thoughts or his feelings. It was more like he was telling us a story, telling us the scene. So I enjoyed that, and ultimately I'm interested by what I heard. I mean, number one, it sounds like we are talking about a journey and, departing from, what was it, an empty harbor, waving goodbye. But with the sonics, it made me think maybe it's less literal ocean and more like the ocean of space and time and, moving on to the future of humanity, which was then bolstered, maybe, by the reference to these caveman paintings, which by and large, when people talk about that, they're talking about the Cro-Magnon cave artwork in parts of Europe. There are also, pre-modern humanity cave art specimens or examples in different places around the world, but the most famous ones are in France and parts of Europe, and ultimately speak to a simpler way of life, one with, rich with animalistic metaphor and all manner of things important to pre-modern humanity or pre-modern hominids, which is to say, wild animals and domesticated animals and, symbolic representations of the heavens and so on. So I feel like maybe the idea that, he's gonna stay here while the other person is over there might relate to a desire to stay in the present and maybe even looking to the past. And there's a group of humanity that are moving beyond, whether that's literally going out into space, moving into the future, moving into some technological era that in some ways is departing from the simplicity of or the grounded concerns of the people who made those cave art paintings, which is maybe why they're frowning. So yeah, I don't know. The Euphoria became more complicated as the song went along as I heard the lyrics, which of course I may not be hearing or seeing in the right way. But yeah, it sounded like we are making reference to a sea of some kind. Now, was the line drowning? There was a repeated mantra. It sounded like drowning, which it does bring to mind the notion, which, some people who've survived drowning incidents by being resuscitated have suggested that drowning in the world of ways you can die suddenly actually has some euphoric quality to it, because once the oxygen is not getting to different parts of your body, there's your organs sort of go into this inert state or so on, or a type of existence where you start to feel numb. And so again, there are people who have reported drowning incidents as having this odd euphoric quality to them. So maybe the drowning is actually the euphoria that's being referenced, but I still feel like even then it might relate to metaphorical meaning about drowning and as it relates to humanity and their trajectories, plural, whether that's again in time, in technology, or in space. So, yes, whether the harbor is a literal harbor and people are going out to sea on the ocean, or whether Earth is the harbor, or whether the present is the harbor, or whether the older ways of humans doing things, like in these cave paintings, is the harbor that has now been departed from, it sounds like the narrator has held back, and maybe that means they're drowning. Maybe they're the ones who, because they're not moving on and sailing off into the horizon, however you take that, they're going to end up drowning. But to them, that's euphoria because, they don't agree with the way things are going. So, yeah, these are all very speculative interpretations. I did love the Sonics. It felt like a long tune. I'm going to say like 6 minutes or so. In fact, just over 7. So, yeah, definitely a lengthy tune, and one that was, at least for the first 2 to 3 minutes, mostly or entirely instrumental. And then when the vocals came in, not only were they a bit theatrical, but they were soft or like low within the mix. So it was still like the sonic soundscape, and then the vocals were just one ingredient in that. Whereas, there are songs where the vocals are the loudest ingredient and they're very front and center, and everything else is sort of supporting or accompanying. Whereas here it felt like they were just like one ingredient in this big soundscape. So I look forward to hearing what people have to say about this one. Let me know, and I will see you next time. Peace.